Interesting times in the world of Magic the Gathering, as Mono White is conniving to bend new Capenna around itself. And at the same time, eBay has introduced a new vault service, which could be amazing for Magic, or could lead to more problems.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a Magic the Gathering news weekend roundup. And we're going to be talking about two major things. The connive mechanic and mono white moving outside of its normal home in Magic, and the eBay situation with the whole vault scenario. Now, I do have a little note on the side as well about pathways to talk about at the very end and pioneers. So, I want to start out talking about connive and mono white. The best way to do that is to show you the spoiler card that actually introduces the connive mechanic. So, up on the screen, you are going to see Raffine Scheming Seer. This is the Sphinx demon leader of the Obscura faction on New Capenna, right? This is a pretty interesting card. For a black, a blue, and a white, you get a 1/4 legendary Sphinx demon that has flying and ward 1, and the ability, whenever you attack, target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. And how connive works is you draw X cards, then you discard X cards, and you get an additional bonus of for each non-land card you discarded this way, you put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So connive is an interesting combat and card draw mechanic kind of shoved together, right? On the surface, it feels a little bit weird when you look at it and go, okay, so this is essentially Blue's looting ability, but with an additional bonus slapped onto it, right? If you're not familiar with the term looting, it's essentially draw then discard. If you're discarding then drawing, it's considered rummaging, and that's a red mechanic. I have to admit, there is so much when it comes to Magic the Gathering in terms of terminology and mechanics, it can be easy to get left behind and not know what's going on. So we're specifically talking about looting. Looting is a blue aligned ability. So clearly, when we look at Raffine, the card ties together fine. Connive definitely feels like a blue ability, right? But when you move it into mono white, which is exactly what's going to happen, Mark Rosewater has confirmed that there are multiple instances of connive on mono white cards. Now, this is not the norm, right? Wizards of the Coast has in recent times been trying to find ways to push white more to the forefront, right? Depending on the format you're playing, white may have a decent level of strength, but it genuinely has struggled over the last number of years because white is one of the most unfun colors of Magic. Now, that's not me knocking white, that's just stating the facts, right? When you look at the rules and the way things work, blue and white are really good at telling you what you can and can't do. Blue by going, no, I'm going to counter that, and white by going, I'm going to set all these rules. You can only attack me with one creature. You can only play one spell a turn. You can only do this. It's all about minimizing what you're allowed to do, or basically tacking additional costs on what you want to do, making it more restrictive through just kind of layering rules upon you. Now, obviously, that's not a lot of fun to play against. You may be somebody who enjoys doing that to somebody, but it's not the most fun style of play to engage with, right? Like when you go up against a green deck, aside from in the most modern of times where they've made some super powerful green cards like back in Throne of Eldraine days. But if you go up against a green deck, you're not worried that the green deck is going to set all the rules for the game. You might be worried they're going to run over you with giant creatures, but you're not worried they're going to limit your fun in a number of ways. And white was really bad for that. So after doing market research, Wizards found out, players love green. Let's beef green. And they went nutty beef and green, but at the same time, they were like, players really don't react well to white's rule setting. Why don't we pull back on that? But the problem is that leaves a huge hole in white's color identity. And as a result, it makes the color weaker. One of the strongest things they could do, set more rules on the board, was taken away from them, right? And so there was a while where white really lagged. And it seems like Wizards' new philosophy is to create rule setting, but rule setting that's not quite as harsh, that gives you more control over the rules. So instead of making an enchantment that goes, you can only play one spell a turn or something along those lines, right? They will make a card that says, you can't, if you do X, you will be punished. So recent examples would be like white creatures that say, if you attack with 2 creatures, I get to draw a card. If you play 2 spells in a turn, I get to draw a card. So the other person can choose whether they want to obey these new rules or not, and it's a sort of more interactive, right? You're not just stuck there going, I'm only allowed to do this. It's like, I can do this or this, but if I do this, my opponent gains from it. So white has been getting this sort of like, a lot of it has been card draw for real. And this connive ability actually feels like a pretty solid fit for like a mono white style. Now, this isn't a permanent shift into white, right? Connive is not permanently becoming a white ability. This is what is known as a color pie bend, and it's being allowed specifically for the Obscura, specifically in the set of New Capenna, right? So don't expect to see connive going forwards on a bunch of stuff unless somehow it actually turns out to work really well and Wizards decides to move it into that part of the color pie. Because understand, sometimes what happens is Wizards just experiments with trying things as color pie breaks or bends, and as a result of it, they go, oh, hey, wait a minute, actually, these abilities make more sense over here. They're constantly trying to rebalance the color pie and shift abilities so that every color has strengths and weaknesses, although it does seem in more recent times they're moving away from colors having as strong weaknesses. So a great example of that would be in recent times how black now can destroy enchantments, right? Black couldn't really do much at all about enchantments. Black and red were the worst at getting rid of enchantments, but black has been moving up the chain, being given enchantment destruction spells, make your opponent sacrifice enchantment spells, right? And it doesn't feel too strong. It doesn't feel like it's in the wrong place. So these sort of experiments work pretty well here and there, right? And when you look at a mono white deck, if you're playing, let's say, a little white weenie deck, having connive is really, really solid, because the whole point with your little white weenies is you want to overwhelm and swarm, right? But you can run out of gas, you can run into problems, your little guy's getting taken out. Connive is both going to grow your guys and get you more fuel. Now, it's not perfect in that the +1/+1 has to come from non-land cards being discarded. It would probably be a little too strong if it was just pitch lands, put +1/+1 counters on your dudes, right? So the question of what strength level the connive will come in at will depend, because it's going to be set at connive X, right? So you could have a mono white creature with connive 1, connive 3. The power level of the mechanic is also going to depend on the power level and casting cost of the cards that it is applied to. But for me, as somebody who's been a part of Magic forever, it's always interesting to see an ability find a new home and kind of move around. So connive will be white specifically for this. Honestly, like blue creatures getting bigger as a result of looting kind of doesn't really feel on flavor. So connive might actually just be a mechanic that we only see on the Obscura, only see on Capenna, and never actually see again, with the exception of maybe a Modern Horizons side set or something like that, right? So it's interesting to me to see what's going on. Now, let us turn to another item of interest, that being the eBay Vault. Now, you may have heard rumblings about this. I was looking over the documentation. Now, I didn't do a full deep dive into all the terms and conditions. I just read the few pages of facts and things like that to get the general thrust of what's going on with the Vault. Now, the Vault isn't specific to Magic the Gathering. It is eBay's program for all high-end cards. So obviously, other card games, you know, you've got Pokemon, you've got Yu-Gi-Oh!, you've got sports cards, which are huge, and Magic the Gathering. When you look through the images that they show going over all the information for the Vault, you see all of these card games very heavily represented, although Magic is represented far less than everything else. Pokemon takes the front seat to this, and I do believe that them coming up with this Vault concept actually really has to do with the whole craze that happened over the last year or so. You may or may not have been familiar with it, but there was this massive gold rush in the card markets. It didn't really hit Magic because Magic was already like pretty much heavily financialized, whereas Pokemon and everything like that, you've got a ton of kids with the cards, and there are people in the Pokemon markets flipping cards and stuff, but it wasn't quite the same as Magic. There's more room for craziness in those card games, especially because of just the widespread you don't need to be a Pokemon card game player to own Pokemon cards and collect them, right? It's got a much wider reach. But regardless, the point of the vault is to deal with exclusively high-end expensive cards. We're talking in the range of like $750 and up, although they might change the range. It might be something like $350, whatever it is. You just need to know these are super expensive Magic cards, whatever card game. We're gonna focus on Magic so I don't go too astray here, right? So the idea behind this is supposed to be where eBay brings in third-party authenticators. And what happens is this third-party process is in between you and the seller. As it stands now on eBay, anybody can post whatever they want for sale, no problem, and it's just, okay, I want to buy it, you want to sell it, great. If there are any problems, then we have to untangle it. Did it get lost in the mail? Is this fraud? Did you do whatever? Then you've got to kind of untangle everything. Oh, you sent me a fake garbage card. This isn't even the real deal, right? So I imagine part of it as well is eBay dealing with a bunch of hassles of people trying to do returns and untangle everything. And if you are a layman, you are going to stand no chance against counterfeit cards, especially counterfeit Magic cards, all right? I know people who have been involved in this game pretty much as long as me, who have been dealing with cards a ton, and they will still contact me and say, hey bro, I need you to check some cards for me and let me know if these are real or counterfeits. Like, the counterfeits have gotten progressively better, and there's different styles of counterfeits, and if you haven't dealt with like tons and tons and tons of cards, counterfeits can be extremely difficult to detect. So on one hand, this program could be really useful. You've got a guy over here going, yo, I want to sell my goat tickler. It's worth 10 grand. And a guy over here going, yo, I want to buy that goat tickler. I got the 10 grand, but I want to make sure it really is the goat tickler. And you ain't trying to fool me, right? So goat tickler gets sent on to the vault, which is like eBay's third-party system, authentication system, where somebody who supposedly is an expert in the cards basically goes over the eBay description of what the card is, goes over all the aspects of the card, and makes sure that it matches the eBay auction description and is authentic. So this is not a grading service like you see with BGS or PSA, where the card is going to be given a rating out of 10 based on surface, corners, everything like that. But the surface, the corners, everything like that are going to be checked by these authenticators when they receive the card. So Goat Tickler shows up, it says this Goat Tickler is near mint, it has perfect corners, minor surface damage, right? So they check the card, okay, corners are fine, minor surface damage, yep, it's everything it's supposed to be. Then it continues along its way, right? If there's a problem, then obviously the sale is halted and the stuff is sent back to the original guy. Here is your Goat Tickler, it wasn't up to snuff, and deal is off, right? So they're supposed to authenticate in the middle. Now, this is going to rest heavily on the level of authenticators that they employ, right? Where are these authenticators coming from? How much experience do they have? Because authenticating like ancient vintage Magic cards is very difficult, right? There's a lot of little things that you need to know about. Checking the rosettes and everything. People be sitting there with their little jeweler's loops. Like, it gets serious. I know a ton of different tests to figure out if a card is real, right? There's tons of different variances that you will find, and it doesn't help that Wizards has changed things in more recent times to change the interior of the cards, the stuff they used to put everything together. Before it was solid blue cores, now you'll find purple cores. A lot of the counterfeits are black cores, but if they can find out how to effectively mimic the paper from the French pulp mill that they got this stuff from, and that distinctive, that blue pattern that's inside of the cards, that's from the glue they use to adhere the cards. So if you can essentially emulate that effectively enough, you can fool somebody who doesn't really know what's up. There are people out there who insist that it will be impossible to ever counterfeit old Magic cards. I don't believe that because technology continues to improve. And as humans, we have all of these different indicators that we use to prove, hey, these are the real ones. Check it out. People will say the printing presses that they use, the printing plates that they used for the original old school Magic cards were kind of wonky and garbagey because the company was new. And as a result, it creates all kinds of imperfections that are impossible to duplicate. And I say to that, there's no way. There's no way this will be impossible for all of time. We can 3D print houses and stuff. They're starting to 3D print human organs. And you're going to try and tell me that we can't duplicate errors made on paper? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not a realistic perspective to have. So it's really going to boil down to there are counterfeits that are going to try and float through this system. And the question becomes, are eBay's authenticators going to be good enough that they can catch it? Or are they going to allow counterfeiters to essentially have a validation service where the counterfeiters can send it in? If it makes it past the graders, well, now it's sent out in this little plastic, like they send it out in what's similar to a graded case. So it's going to come out sealed. You can't open it. You can't tamper with it. So this already has eBay's seal of approval. The authenticators have said this is the real deal. Here's the package it's coming. In fact, part of the vault service is if you don't want the cards sent to you directly, you can actually have eBay hang on to them for you. And then they will, like if you sell it later on, they'll just send it directly to the person that you sold it to. So you can get a card that's been authenticated and never even see it, right? So, I mean, to me, this is on one hand, a useful consumer protection because there is a lot, and I mean a lot of scams going on out there on eBay specifically, right? So these kind of protections are genuinely important, but the credentials of the people, specifically the ones dealing with Magic cards. I don't know about the vagaries of sports cards, Pokemon cards, or whatever else, but I imagine they have a higher quality of standard than Magic the Gathering does. I know sports cards do because I've seen like, they use sports cards, messed up sheets as like packing filler. They'll just cram them into boxes to stop stuff from moving around because they're garbage to the company. And Wizards of the Coast used to operate that way. You know what I mean? They used to go, hey, we don't put out low quality stuff. We burn it. That's why Summer Magic is so rare because it was a poor quality printing and they burned almost all of it. Only the stuff that some employees were allowed to take home made it out into the wild because that's how Wizards of the Coast used to operate. Nowadays, they don't care about the card quality, right? So I don't know how difficult it will be to authenticate sports cards, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon cards, but I can tell you for a fact, it's very difficult to authenticate Magic cards. I'm somebody who has been heavily invested in Magic for decades and decades. I've dealt with tons and tons of Magic cards, purchased tons of collections from people. I was responsible for making sure cards flew through a game shop at a spectacular rate, right? So I've dealt with insane amounts of cards. And every once in a while, a counterfeit comes by that's so good that I go, whoa, things are getting ugly in the realm of counterfeiting. So the vault concept is a good one, but there's danger inherent in it. Now, since we are talking about the financial side of things, there is another little tidbit I want to add on to the video for you who have stuck around this long. A little bit of advice for you, up to you whether you take it or not. I'm not saying this is written in stone, but Wizards of the Coast has just said Pioneer is going to be a big part of the Pro Tour, right? Pioneer is going to become a bigger thing in Magic the Gathering. We're going to see it show up on Arena. They haven't said that, but that's my suspicion is that Pioneer is going to be the non-rotating format that Wizards of the Coast offers to the community as the branch of peace. Please let us keep Alchemy. We'll give you Pioneer. Like, that's what I'm expecting. So I'm not the only one thinking that. There's a bunch of people looking at Pioneer going, okay, what do we do? Now, when it comes to Pioneer staples, the one thing I want to point out to you right now is pathways are the hotness. You know what I'm talking about? Those flip on one side, oh, I make blue. On one side, I make white, whatever. You got the whole range of 10 of them. They were done in, Kaldheim and Zendikar Rising, right? So you got the pathways from those sets. Those are going to be big lands in Pioneer. So if you have some of them, you may want to tuck them away because the chances of them tanking down to 0 when standard rotates is pretty low. Pioneer doesn't have a lot of awesome lands, and the pathway lands are absolutely great for making sure you have the color that you want, right? And there are already spikes happening out there in the market. It's specifically happening with the most popular decks in Pioneer. So like the white-blue pathway is spiking up more than other ones, it seems like. And I know I don't normally cover finance stuff, but this pathway thing seems like such an obvious, hey, if you got them, you might want to hang on to them, either so you don't have to pick them up yourself again later at an inflated value, or because if you hang on to them, they're going to make great trade fodder later on, or if you need to like get them into a store for a trade or whatever else. You know what I mean? You can just benefit from the knowledge. So I figured I would tack that onto the video as well. Hopefully that is of use to at least a few, because it was a surprise to me when I was looking through everything. It's like, but it makes sense, dude. Anyhow, that wraps up the weekend news roundup. Thanks for coming by, my friends. Big shout out to my patrons, and I will see you guys next time.